Newcastle United was stunned by West Ham at St James's Park on Monday night. They won 2-0 and fully deserved the victory as well. In this video I'm going to be explaining what I think the big issue with the squad might be and also why the defeat happened. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, welcome back to another analysis video. It's been a little while, but the issues that maybe we've seen earlier in the season returned yesterday. Newcastle were very sluggish in the second half, lacked ideas, they lacked creativity, they lacked something different. I think that does sort of paint a picture of maybe something quite big that maybe needs to change in the recruitment plan. I know that we keep saying about this after every defeat, and every defeat can't have a big picture about it. I understand that fully, but I think there was something about that defeat yesterday that really said to me that something needs to change in terms of the structure of the team and how the team has been built. We'll get into that. Another reminder to please like, share and subscribe to the videos on the channel. I'm really proud of how the channel's grown over the last month or so since I've brought in some changes. There is a podcast coming, I promise. I keep saying it, but there is a podcast coming. There is hopefully another exciting non-Newcastle United video coming as well this week. I'm really looking forward to more content, so please do like, share and subscribe and hit the notification bell as well to make sure you never miss an upload from this channel. But yeah, we'll get straight into it with Newcastle United and a really poor defeat. If you haven't already as well checked out my live reaction, you can watch that back. It's on the channel right now. I'll link it in the description. But yeah, very poor performance overall. And I think the first thing to say is that, as I said yesterday, it was quite inexplicable again in terms of how they started really well. Anthony Gordon was on the ball, Alexander Isak had the ball in the net. There was a real buzz about the team, obviously coming into this game off great form. That win against Nottingham Forest, I did say at the City Ground that the international break was coming at a poor time, as it sort of proved, but there was a lot of sort of good feeling around the club back at St James's Park after a couple of good wins, and Alexander Isak was the focus of the War Flags display, and it was really vast as well. It was really impressive at both ends, the Leazes and the Gallagher. Obviously got very much his future in mind, and obviously interest from Arsenal and Chelsea, which keeps buzzing around, and the sort of the discussions around his future that will not go away because of his contract situation. But it really felt like Newcastle were onto something from the very start. They started really well. They had, as I say, they had the ball in the net, and you got the feeling in the first 5-10 minutes that it was going to be a very comfortable evening, and I think a lot of West Ham fans travelled to St James's Park thinking it was going to be a very tough game. Theo Walcott in the Sky Sports studio was very dismissive of West Ham, refused to even give them a chance just before kickoff, which obviously a lot of West Ham fans I'm sure will be enjoying watching back this morning. Fair play to that. But as soon as the goal went in for Thomas Souček, the first corner that I think West Ham have scored in a while, first corner Newcastle conceded in a long time as well, and it was really poor marking from Lloyd Kelly, the game suddenly changed, and I think that's a big mentality issue. Newcastle, I'd love to know what the stats are. I said this last night in my live chat, in terms of Newcastle facing shots or losing possession or anything negative in a defensive sense, or positive in an attacking sense for an opposition player in the sort of 5-10 minutes after conceding the goal, because they're really poor once they concede a goal. They might well concede a second one, and that was the case in the second half when Aaron Wan-Bissaka scored. 2 minutes later Jarrod Bowen has a shot on goal and Nick Pope makes a save. But that isn't anything to do with the tactics. It isn't anything to do with Eddie Howe. I think there's a lot of debate about whether Eddie Howe is at fault for this or the players are at fault. I think it's a bit of both, because in the second half Eddie Howe's substitutions were very predictable again, and they didn't really offer much, and I'll get into that in a minute because that is the crux of the video in terms of offering something different that Newcastle seem to lack. But I think this is down to the mentality of the players. This is down to the belief that they have, or something about them that isn't quite right, in terms of the fact that they seem to go in their shell, and they lost all semblance of structure and lost all semblance of confidence, and everything that they were doing in the first 10 minutes just ceased to happen for the next 10-15. West Ham sort of settled into their own pattern in terms of where they were really defensively struggling in the first 10-15 minutes. They were very narrow. Anthony Gordon had space out wide. They were very deep as well, so there was lots of space. And as I said earlier I tweeted or put on Blue Sky, that I thought Newcastle were going to have a real field day in that midfield because of Carlos Soler, Lucas Paquetá and Thomas Suchet. There's not really a defensive player in there, and there's not really a very mobile player in there. So Joe Willock, if Newcastle get the counter-pressing going, Joe Willock and Longstaff and Bruno could really get in there and dictate the game from the midfield. But actually what happened was West Ham settled into a deep midfield pattern, and then they sprung on Newcastle in midfield with Soler and Paquetá really dictating the play themselves. And I think that happened from the pretty much the 10th or 15th minute, and it was really, really difficult to watch because that was what you were expecting Newcastle to do. And I think that's to do with confidence and mentality. They really struggle to react to certain things, I think, in games, and that's quite a long-standing thing. It's easy to say that after the defeat. Obviously, they came off the back of the City Ground win where they were brilliant in the second half. They really stepped up. But in this game, they went and their performance nosedived. And actually, as I said earlier, the substitutions were very poor, or at least the impact of the substitutions was very poor, because that is a very strong bench. You've got Callum Wilson on there, Kieran Trippier on there, returning from injury. You've got Tonali, you've got Murphy, Almiron, a lot of quality on that bench to really make a difference in this game, and it just didn't happen. And I think the big thing for me is that Newcastle, lots of people have talked about buying a number 6 to make the 4-3-3 work better, and I fully understand that. I think that has obviously been a hot debate for a couple of years, and that's one thing that Newcastle struggled with when the ball's turned over. But I also think they struggle to create anything in that space themselves. They don't have a player who can pick up the ball and do something different and create something. Like, you know, the part of the reason why the substitutions didn't work is because effectively you're bringing one player off for another player who does something very similar. The one thing that didn't work, that was a change, was going to 4-4-2 with Isak and Wilson. That, I think, allowed Paquetá to really sort of dictate the play in a deeper role than he was in the first half. And he was, I think, in fairness, you do kind of have to stand up to West Ham and say, fair play, you were fantastic, because they were. Lopetegui got his tactics spot on, as I say, from the last 15 minutes, and Paquetá was dictating the play high up the pitch, low in the pitch. He was everywhere, and Jared Bowen and Crescencio Somerville will get into the game in the wide areas alongside Aaron Wan-Bissaka as well. Obviously scored that goal in the second half. So Newcastle couldn't deal with West Ham in the second half, especially once they went to a 4-4-2. But I think there's something that lacks about the structure of the team and the difference in the team when trying to chase a game. If you look at other teams, if you look at West Ham, they've got Paquetá. You look at Tottenham, they've got James Maddison. Liverpool, they've got Dominic Szoboszlai. All of those players had real impacts on games this week, and they're playing that sort of very advanced role. Obviously, I know Paquetá did a lot of deeper stuff in this game as well, but they're playing a very advanced role. They play in between the lines, and they can make something happen and create something different. And Newcastle have faced that within other games as well themselves, which is really difficult to I think mark against. But also it allows Newcastle to change their system, because, as I've said before, Eddie Howe is too wedded to this 4-3-3 and this passing and this possession based and this trying to get Gordon into the game, trying to unlock Isak and get him into the game as well. And a lot of the structure is very similar. And actually, I think if you look at Tonali and Bruno and Longstaff, they're all they do different things, but they're all sort of get the ball and give the ball players. There's nobody who's going to dribble and create something. Yes, you've got to get Joe Willock in the sort of right position to make that happen. He doesn't sort of create something from nothing himself. It's all very structured, when it works, it's brilliant. Anthony Gordon runs at defences, Harvey Barnes runs at defences, so does Murphy and Almiron. They're very, very structured and cogs in a machine, but they don't offer something different. They can't create something from nothing. I think that is maybe what the squad lack. I don't think it's out wide that they lack that. I think it's in a central area. I think a number 10 might be what Newcastle needs. Somebody like a Morgan Gibbs-White, who they've been linked with in the past. They've been linked with James Maddison, obviously, before he went to Tottenham, Dominic Szoboszlai before he went to Liverpool. They have looked at this area before, and I do think it makes a lot of sense to go and try and find a player who can play in that position, because it not only creates something different in the game, but it also allows for a change in formation and something else to happen in game as well. When Newcastle, in that second half where they were completely lost and they didn't have anything to that when their systems weren't working, when their structure wasn't working, when Gordon wasn't getting into the game because the machine wasn't quite functioning properly. You need somebody who can do something different, and Isak can do that sometimes. I think that's key, and obviously Bruno has done it at times as well. There are players who can move into other areas and do different things, but there's nobody who specialises in creating something from nothing. I think that is what Newcastle lack. And so there's lots of talk about the number 6 role, there's lots of talk about defensive structure, and I fully understand that because the 4-3-3 has left that exposed at times as well. But the 4-3-3 has also worked quite well in terms of that when Longstaff's there and at times when Tonali's been there. What I think that they do, like as I say, is that number 10 pit maybe, and that ability to change the formation, because you can't play. Lots of people call for 4-2-3-1 in recent weeks, fully understandably, but there's nobody who can lay in behind the striker who can do it properly. And I think that's kind of the problem. And also, when you play 4-2-3-1, generally your midfield is much more structured and much more compact as a result. So maybe you could look at playing Tonali and Bruno as a double pivot rather than trying to play them as a 3 when the space opens up in front of them. And that kind of is the fundamental issue with why that goes wrong. And every defeat can't have big, long, lasting consequences. But I do think that this game has shown quite a few issues in terms of creativity, in terms of offering something different, and the substitutions, which are very predictable. Everything is very predictable. Newcastle are very good at what they do when they get it right, but when they don't, they fall into a pattern. West Ham tried to sit deep and be compact early on in the game and struggled. Once they got a goal and got confidence and Newcastle stepped off, they were able to set themselves, and they made it very, very difficult. And then they allowed the space to be exposed by Paquetá, both high up and low. And I think that's what Newcastle needs, somebody who can do that across the pitch and has a little bit more freedom in the team, just to give themselves that spark in that central area. Somebody like Gibbs-White, somebody like Szoboszlai, somebody like Maddison, all of whom Newcastle have looked at in the past. I fully understand the need for a striker, I fully understand the need for a number 6, but that is just something that I've seen in the last few games that Newcastle need as a way of getting back into games, because they're really, really poor at reacting when they go behind, both immediately after in terms of conceding another chance or possession or ceding momentum, but also finding a way back into it, because they are so structured and they do things so specifically that it can be quite difficult when it doesn't work. Thanks very much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back with another very exciting video hopefully this week. I'm not at a game this weekend, I've got a weekend off because I'm going away. I'll be back with another Newcastle video later this week, and also to review the game at Palace. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.